Hey, it's Fletch. I'm Vice President of Public Safety Solutions at 911 Informed. Welcome to the audio version of my latest blog, Monitoring Emergency Calls, Best Practice with Band-Aid. You know, technology is an interesting animal at times. Quite often when the challenging problems can't be solved with common technology, we tend to give up and compromise some of our entrusted standards and best practices just to begrudgingly accede the solution and check the box. Now, when this happens in a life safety environment, we risk the health and safety of others that have no say in that decision. Quite often these decisions arise out of desperation, when other solutions may exist that actually solve the problem. I think back to the problem exposed in the Carrie Hunt tragedy. By now, most people are familiar with the fact that Carrie's daughter knew to dial 911, and in fact did that 4 times. The reason she never reached 911, a 9 was required for an outside line on the phone system. But why is that phone system programmed like that? Quite simply, a 9 was the commonly used and accepted access code to reach outside trunk lines. And it would directly conflict with dialing 911 directly because numbers needed to be unique. So for many years, the problem of being able to directly dial 911 without an access code was just ignored. Fortunately, there was easy programming that got around that problem. It wasn't until Carrie was murdered in December of 2013 and the 4.5-year fight that Carrie's father, Hank Hunt, took on did a law get put in place that changed all that. Now let's look at monitoring 911 calls and why we do this. First of all, most vendors don't support that bad practice for the obvious legal ramifications and privacy violation concerns. But others do and justify it this way. The most common explanation is enterprises need to listen to the call so they can understand where the emergency is taking place. This is absolutely critical. However, listening to the phone call may not be the best way to understand where the call is coming from. It's just the easiest. What is needed is descriptive station identification and location detection, so that you're not relying on someone speaking their location to understand where the call is coming from. Presenting that information to an on-site response desk is extremely valuable, and this is exactly why on-site notification was part of Carrie's Law from the beginning. Now, another common excuse is that enterprises need to understand what the emergency is, so they can respond accordingly. Again, this is just weak justification, as I've never seen multiple response teams dedicated and assigned to specific emergencies based on what is happening. If first responders even exist in the enterprise, they're typically trained to deal with multiple types of situations, and their presence is a stopgap to enable fast and efficient response from emergency services. Collecting and adding in additional information from video cameras, IoT sensors, and other information available in the enterprise likely provides a better operational and situational awareness picture about the incident. And no one's privacy has been invaded. And speaking about privacy, what about HIPAA and general privacy concerns? Are the people that are listening to potentially very personal and sensitive conversations properly vetted and trained? And what about that information leaking externally? That could put the enterprise at a significant disadvantage in a lawsuit, while providing very little value in improving the situation or response. Again, risk, reward, exposure. Finally, an excuse that I constantly hear: I want to record all of the calls to protect myself. Well, not only does it raise the same red flags as the other concerns, specifically, recording takes it even a step further where it violates the federal wiretap law, especially in states that require all parties to acknowledge and accept the fact that they may be recorded. Now, while that acceptance may be easily collected from employees, it's not collected from guests in the building, nor is it collected from the 911 call taker that's answering the call. Those are all potential parties on the line, and in a multi-party state, you don't have their explicit permission. Plus, the PSAP already records every call into their center. So if there was ever a concern over the contents of a 911 call, that information is available from a vetted and trusted resource. where there are things like chain of custody safeguards that it hasn't been tampered with, already in place. In closing, there are several good solutions that exist out there by reputable vendors that take the problem seriously and solve the issues. There are also other solutions that are based on hype, and while seemingly correct for the issues at hand, they just don't follow current and modern best practices and protocols. If you're looking at any solution that you're not an expert in, caveat emptor. Make sure that the person who is explaining the solution is one that's reputable and not just creating a bunch of hype. As the deadlines for Ray Baum's Act loom right around the corner, remember, this is a federal compliance issue, and to make sure that your remediation is high on your list of to-dos. This is Fletch. Thanks so much for listening. Next week will be our second episode of our Next Gen Future Makers podcast series. That's a series dedicated to those individuals in our industry that not only contribute to the technology today, but take that extra step to inspire the leaders of tomorrow. I'll be publishing a Future Makers episode every 2 weeks, with my own blogs and podcasts on the opposite weeks. Last week, we kicked off the series with my good friend Jeremy DeMar, the 911 Executive Director at Mountain Valley Emergency Communications right here in New Jersey. And next week, we've got an interview with the one and only Tracy Eldridge from Rapid SOS. That's an episode that you don't want to miss. Go to www.fletch.tv for all my blogs and link to both podcasts. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Stay safe.